2024 Democratic presidential candidate Marianna Williamson told TMZ that network television will not let her campaign.
CNN and MSNBC aren't having me on because they're just chopping wood and carrying water for the DNC. So all those groups that you mentioned are important. The young people are important, and older people are important in demographic terms. The issue with young people, though, is they're on TikTok, as you said, and I can get onto TikTok. There are no gatekeepers. So it's not so much that I figured it out. It's just that when I went there, I'm able to actually get across to young people who are on TikTok. And it's a kind of democratization of the news.
In response, journalist Glenn Greenwald tweeted that RFK Jr. and Marianna Williamson have more support in every poll than Chris Christie, yet Christie is constantly on TV, NBC, ABC, CNN, while RFK and Williamson rarely are. That's because the DNC instructed there's no Democratic primary, so the media obeys.
Yeah, I mean, CNN, MSNBC, their viewers are never Trump-type people, so they like Chris Christie, so they have Chris Christie on a lot. It's not, it's not rocket science. But Marianna is absolutely right, and this is a good thing. RFK Jr. has said a similar thing. This is the power of independent content creators and platforms like social media that, warts and all, we do a lot of complaining about their moderation policies and all sorts of things. But, I always say, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. It is good that these platforms exist, that there's independent outlets and shows and creators who are using the power of the internet to bring the people perspectives and policies and ideas and people that they would have no way to reach otherwise, because the mainstream media is so one single track minded in their thinking. And people like Marianna Williamson and RFK Jr. and a lot of my own libertarian people and a lot of your leftist people and just contrarians in general, people who fall outside. Again, it's a very narrow set of views that is acceptable on cable. It's extremely narrow. Extremely narrow set of issues. So we are so lucky, honestly, we are lucky to live in a time where you don't need that lane. It's nice to have it available to you, but you don't need it.
Well, I do think ultimately you do need that lane. I mean, if you look back to recent history and recent examples, someone who was shut out of the media, hashtag Bernie blackout, was able to get very far in both of his races in the last two cycles without having media attention or getting the kind of media attention that you don't necessarily want. Like Chris Matthews saying that there's going to be brown shirts in the streets and beheadings in Central Park if Bernie were to win. He said, I believe, after he won Nevada, God forbid. And on the other hand, on the other side of it, there were tens of millions of dollars in earned media for Joe Biden after he won South Carolina. So after losing the first three contests, he was able to have a resurgence because the mainstream media was in agreement that he was the guy, that this validated all of his losses, and the fact that he was able to perform specifically with black voters in a state that Democrats were never going to win in a general election was reflective of his electability at large. And that, combined with some other factors, I think was really the death knell for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Moreover, when you look at Marianna Williamson and RFK Jr., especially Marianna Williamson, because RFK Jr. has gotten a hearing from more conservative media outlets in the way that Marianna Williamson has not, and I think it is really hurting their campaign. Imagine where she could conceivably be if most Americans even knew that she was running. As it is, she's already polling better than someone like Vivek Ramaswamy, who, again, has been granted official town halls from mainstream news outlets and gotten much more attention. Marianna Williamson can barely even get on a panel at MSNBC, much less a one-on-one sit-down the way that certain conservatives have gotten on liberal media outlets. And even in the independent media, social media sphere, it's becoming increasingly difficult. So someone like Bernie was really buoyed by the online interest and the Bernie bro phenomenon and all of that on Twitter. Well, now you have a Twitter where Elon Musk says it's going to be a free speech platform and says there's going to be all this restored equality and transparency. But although he came out and said very openly that he was going to offer his own platform to have the kind of introductions that he gave to both Ron DeSantis and RFK Jr., Marianna Williamson has publicly and privately solicited him to follow up on that offer, and he has declined to do so now for months. So yes, she's now not even able to get the same kind of transparency or the same kind of equality on Twitter that seemed to used to exist. Now she's sidelined even further to TikTok, which I think is a boon for her to still have that. But that is also just a sliver of the population. Now it's younger people on TikTok, and I think you can see clearly in the numbers how much social media matters and how much media access matters, because among the demographic group that mostly occupies TikTok, Marianna Williamson is way ahead of RFK Jr. and not that far behind of Joe Biden with the voters under, I think, 30 age group. And I think that is proof positive of why they won't let her have that same kind of access on the mainstream media.
Mm. I mean, obviously more mainstream media access would help anyone. And yes, people who are giving town halls to Christie's and Ramaswamy should also give town halls to RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. I mean, the difference is just, I don't accept this as legitimate, but the difference that they're thinking is that Joe Biden is the incumbent president, and we support him, and we don't want to give him a challenge.
Well, that's what's so
Whereas on the Republican
pernicious.
side, there is no incumbent.
Right? You have Simone Sanders, former Biden
I mean, they don't think there
press
should be
secretary.
primaries. They don't think there should be any. They think it should be a coronation for Biden, and whereas there's no. I mean, some Republicans want there to be a Trump coronation, obviously, but the media is not handling it that way.
Yeah, and just be honest about where you're coming from. When Simone Sanders, former Biden press secretary, who now has a news show on MSNBC, says there is no primary, there will be no primary, repeating the line that all of these Democratic Party acolytes have been saying since the beginning of this race, they are admitting to you plainly on their biased media platforms that they don't have any intention of doing anything other than rigging the race for their guy. They're telling you. I mean, you've got to on some level respect that they're kind of just saying it out loud. But of course, they don't control the democratic processes. Them saying that there is no primary doesn't manifest that into being. And the voters of New Hampshire certainly aren't falling for this.
Reminds me of Black Panther when a Killmonger, the bad guy, shows up to challenge T'Challa for the throne, but he has a right to do that. So they have their little battle, and he overthrows T'Challa.
Yeah.
And then T'Challa's not dead, and he comes back, and he's like, our fight is not over because you didn't kill me. And Killmonger's like, no, it's over. I'm the king now. We're not redoing the fight.
It seems there's something, I don't know, a little almost like tantrumy and like toddlerish and pathetic about just constantly averring that this is the way the world is without being willing to engage in a substantive way about it. It is very disappointing, but it's not just Marianna, obviously, who is a left candidate angling for the presidency. According to ABC's reporting, 2024 Green Party candidate Cornel West owes more than $500,000 in taxes and child support. Records show that West owes nearly $466,000 in federal income taxes from the years 2013 to 2017. Former Biden campaign operative John Cooper called West a deadbeat when he shared that, according to tax records in Mercer County, New Jersey, where he owns a home, this came after he accrued and later repaid a debt of nearly $725,000 from 1998 to 2005, more than $34,000 in 2008. ABC also reports that he has an outstanding $49,500 in child support and a child support judgment from 2003. When asked about this on the Breakfast Club podcast last week, Cornel West said that this was being used as a distraction from his presidential campaign and added, quote, anytime you shine a flashlight under somebody's clothes, you're going to find all kind of mess because that's what it is to be human. Now, what do you make of this, Robbie? Do you think this is going to hurt Cornel West's campaign?
I don't think it will hurt him necessarily, frankly, at the numbers of support which he's receiving. People voting for the Green Party are really invested in the ideas of the Green Party and supporting third parties and are probably very ideologically on board with what he has to say. And I don't know how many are going to be turned off by this, maybe some of them. I mean, it does. I like Cornel West just fine. I'm not trying to, smear him or anything. It sounds maybe like a legitimate issue I think it's not wrong to want political candidates to have some sort of, competence with their own finances and things like that. And again, I don't know the situation. Maybe it's unfair to him. Maybe it is what it is. I have no idea. This is literally the first I've ever heard of this.
Which of the candidates on offer are we going to pick that don't have pending tax problems.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Wasn't-
but I'm not a Donald Trump or Joe Biden.
But that's
supporter
the
either.
scenario, and that's I think what people
Yeah.
who
I mean, it would
would
be nice to have a candidate who doesn't have these problems.
Yeah, I agree, but this is what I think people like John Cooper, who's one of the loudest Democratic Party acolytes on the internet, don't really recognize. He's advocating for Joe Biden. And many people are going to be looking at this race, and they're looking at Cornel West because they actively don't want Joe Biden or Donald Trump, both of whom have been dogged since the beginning of their races, especially Donald Trump, with accusations of tax mismanagement and unpaid taxes and fraud, et cetera. That was a huge thing in Donald Trump's first campaign. And it's something that obviously Joe Biden is dealing with now vis-a-vis his son, not him personally, but through his son and these accusations that we've talked about in other segments.
It's probably what I'm saying is it could be a compelling reason as a third party voter if I'm choosing, who's going to be I don't have the magic power to choose who's going to be the Libertarian Party candidate, but all things being equal, I'd want one who does not have, outstanding tax or child support.
Sure. I think all things being equal, though, is doing a lot of work.
It's not versus Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I'm still probably going to support the Libertarian Party candidate.
But the question is whether this particular hit negatively affects Cornel West. And if there is no alternative, if all things aren't equal, if this is what it is, then I think it's people like John Cooper shouting into the void, because nobody who likes people like Cornel West like him because he wants to end the corporate duopoly. And they're willing to make some compromises on some other factors without defending it.
Sure.
They just don't care, the options being what they are.
Wouldn't it be nice to not have to compromise?
Unfortunately, the world is what it is. I mean, I would say that in terms of a policy platform, Marianna Williamson is great, except for that she has these foreign policy commitments that have turned off so many people, I think, on the anti-war right and left, and also some of her views on Israel. I think Cornel West is great substantively, but he doesn't have the same kind of political delivery I think that people are used to that may help him or hurt him down the line. And also now this recent story. I mean, if Joe Biden seems to be like a lovely dad, but that doesn't get me very far in the grand scheme of what I need for Americans, what I'd like to see for my own community.
Him for loving his son. How dare they? That's you see that take sometimes from people on social media. It's so brain dead.
Yeah.
More Rising right after this.